Today we speak with homeopath Rachel Welsh, who also featured on a recent episode with her colleague Emma Dalton. In today's episode, though, she's going to be speaking with us about another amazing organisation called Homeopathy at Wellie level. So in Aussie translation, that means homeopathy at gumboot level. And this is an organisation that helps farmers to use homeopathy with their animals. If you want to find out more, visit their website, www.hawl.co.uk. So that's www.h for homeopathy, A for at, W for Wellie, and L for level.co.uk. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Homeopathy Hangout, where we discuss all things homeopathy from around the world. And now my mum and your host, Eugenie Kruger.
Hello, homies, and a very warm welcome to Homeopathy Hangout. Today, we are hanging out with homeopath Rachel Welsh. Welcome, Rachel.
Hi.
It's lovely to have you on today. And I'm wondering if you can maybe tell our listeners a little bit about how you were first introduced to homeopathy.
Yeah, sure. I lived in Hong Kong for about 10 years, and that was during the 1990s. And I had no idea what homeopathy was. And my daughter, who was born in Hong Kong, became really unwell with lots of ear infections. And she had lots of antibiotics, and she got lots of upset stomachs from the antibiotics. So we were on a real roller coaster of ear infection, antibiotics, upset stomach. And we did this for a few months, and I decided that perhaps we needed something different. So fortunately, I was taking her to a little playgroup, and on the wall there was a sign saying, "Do you want to learn about how to support your family's health more naturally?" So I signed up for a 6-week course in homeopathy with a brilliant homeopath who was actually from Tasmania. And I learned how to use homeopathy with my family, which was great. And really the story started there. Came back to England in 1990. And then in about 2015, after my 3 children had got big enough to allow me to do a bit of self-study, I trained to be a homeopath. So I've been a homeopath now for 10 years.
Amazing. And today we're going to be talking about a project called Homeopathy at Wellie level. And I didn't quite get the name at first. So just for those listeners of ours that don't quite understand what homeopathy at Wellie level means or is, Can you tell them a little bit about what it is we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, sure. Homeopathy at Wellie level was actually an initiative by a homeopath with a farming background based in the west of England, which is near Tetbury. For any of you who know the UK, that's sort of near Gloucester and Bristol. And she went to the Royal Agricultural College, and she did her undergraduate dissertation on how to use homeopathy on the farm for farmers. And what she found when she did her research is that farmers were sometimes using homeopathy, but they didn't really understand the principles behind their use and weren't using homeopathy particularly effectively. So she decided it would be a good idea to come up with a short course which was accessible for farmers, people who had never studied any homeopathic study before, in order to have a good working knowledge of the theories of homeopathy, and also to have a small kit of remedies that they could use straight away with their animals, and they could actually see some good results. And so she was inspired by Billy Colony. I don't know if you know him. He's a Scottish comedian. Basically, he had something going on where he was talking about wellies and wellie level, meaning grassroots. Okay. So she decided that she would use wellies, because we say wellies in the UK, but I think you say gumboots. Is that right?
Gumboots, yes.
Yeah. So the equivalent is homeopathy at gumboot level.
At gumboot level, at grassroots level. I love it. That is such a good name.
Yeah. And actually, interestingly, the name Hall, so it's HAWL, that's the sort of acronym that's come up. in Welsh, hall means, you have legal right to do something. So it's got a double whammy in Wales, which is, by studying this course, you have a legal right to do it. I mean, only a joke. But that's what she says is actually interesting because, in the UK, it's very strict. We're not allowed to treat other people's animals
I've heard about
as homeopaths. Yeah,
it's crazy.
But if you own the animal, you can treat your animal with whatever you want. So the idea of homeopathy at Wellie level is that we teach farmers how to use homeopathy more effectively so they can treat their own animals. And then they work alongside homeopathic vets and homeopaths that are also part of the organisation. And then we mentor them. So they are actually making all the decisions, but we actually work alongside them. So it's a mentoring process rather than us administering any homeopathy. And they have to purchase all the homeopathic medicines themselves. So we don't actually prescribe and provide. We just basically offer an environment for them to bounce around some ideas.
That is so cool. I love that saying, where there's a will, there's a way, because I think that is just absolutely ridiculous that homeopathy, which is literally the safest medicine on the planet, that governments think that they can tell you you're not allowed to use it on your animal when steroids and all sorts of drugs are prescribed willy-nilly to dogs, and they have so many allergies and infections and skin diseases and tumors and all sorts of things because of these drugs. Don't get me started. But
absolutely.
That's incredible that at the same time you are empowering these farmers to work with their own. So it's not just the plants or agriculture, but it's also with their animals.
Absolutely, yeah. So
it's incredible.
It's really good. And actually, the course, face-to-face course, is for 3 days, but it's spread over 2 weeks. So, well, actually, it's probably not really 2 weeks, it's over sort of 6 weeks. So you go for week 1 and then you have week 2 off, then you go back for week 3, you have week 4 off, and you go back for week 5. And then on week 6, you're sort of just tying up, what you've learned. So originally when the course was written, about 2001, it was all face-to-face because that's how Chris basically administered the course. And it was actually on one of Prince Charles's farms because Prince Charles is very pro-homeopathy. Of course, with the pandemic, it forced the organisation to start thinking about doing the course online. And they had a really big demand. And so now I teach for them. So I teach face-to-face, but I also teach online as well. So we have adapted the course rather than being 3 full days online, which is a bit much. It's broken down into 6 smaller chunks. It's great because we've had farmers from all over the world joining the course online. So one of the courses I did, there was somebody in America, somebody in Norway, and then the UK, Ireland, and somebody in Spain. So it's great because it's actually spreading the word much more widely. Haven't had anyone in Australia yet, but there are some people who are interested. And Chris Lees is interested actually if there's any farmers or smallholders out there who want to learn how to use homeopathy more effectively. She does have some contacts of experienced homeopaths who are also teachers who are interested in trying to do perhaps a spin-off, which is Australian based. The problem is the time zone's so different between the UK and here that they have looked into running it from here, but think actually it would be better to spread the initiative into Australia and New Zealand. So if anyone is interested, they can contact Chris Lees at the organisation.
That's amazing. That is just so great that you're empowering these people all over the world. And one of the good things that have come out of COVID, I think, is that many people are starting to think more on a global scale now that we see, most of the things that we were doing face-to-face, we can actually do online, and it's actually expanded our thinking a lot. So there definitely has been some good things that have come out of it. I just want to backtrack. Did you say you had face-to-face classes on Prince Charles's farm?
Yeah.
That's
on one
so
of his
cool.
farms.
I was
really
aware.
I never saw him.
I was aware that he had an organic sheep farm. And so was that where you had it?
Well, there wasn't many sheep there. They did have a dairy herd. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
That is so cool. And he has definitely been a really, I mean, you can say about him what you like, but he has been a really good advocate for homeopathy. And, you
That's
know,
right.
in despite of the fact that he's had so much splashback or whatever the word is that you would push back from the mainstream media, he's always stood up for homeopathy, you know, through the decades, which is amazing.
Yeah. That's right. That's
and
right.
his mum and his grandma and great-grandma.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
Cool.
That's right.
So is there anything else that you can tell us about the organisation, a little bit more about what they do and maybe some success stories and also how people can get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically what happens is when people join the course, they don't have to have any background whatsoever in homeopathy. So what we basically teach right at the beginning is how to use just 6 homeopathic remedies. And those homeopathic remedies are really tied to the crises that sometimes happens for animals on the farm, which can precipitate disease. So if you think about it, an animal is outside all the time and it's really affected by weather. So we often think about how the weather is going to have a big impact on an animal's health. So if it's going to be a cold, dry wind, if it's going to be damp, if there's going to be snow, which also we get here in the UK, if it's going to be very hot, all of these things make a big difference to an animal and can really start to lessen their vital force. Do you want me to say what vital force is? Or
yeah, sure. It's been mentioned a few times, but we can never hear it enough.
Yeah, okay. So your vital force is basically your innate energy that you have in your body that keeps you healthy. So if something happens to you in your life, like an accident or a shock or a disease or a virus, it's going to have an impact on your vital force. So for animals on the farm, we're looking at what things could actually start to precipitate disease rather than treating the disease when it's actually happened. So the big crises for animals is weather change, obviously, but things like weaning is extremely stressful for herds. So, you know, if anyone's been on a farm when all of the calves have been taken away from their mothers, there's a lot of noise. And this stresses the animal out. You know, we could go on forever about how do animals have feelings. And we don't really know that. But certainly they're upset when they don't have their young. So we would be looking at remedies which are to do with separation and grief. So there are remedies. Ignatia, for example, is a really good remedy that we often use with humans when they are grieving. And we teach our farmers how to use Ignatia when they are about to separate the young from the mothers. And it really reduces the amount of stress. And when you reduce the amount of stress in the herd, you're much less likely to get disease. So that's one thing that could cause a lot of stress. The other thing is if there is an accident. So, you know, maybe an animal falls or a dog gets in with a herd of sheep or flock of sheep, you would treat the animals soon after that shocking event with another remedy. So say aconite. Aconite is a remedy that's really good for shock and trauma. We also look at routine things like birth. So we teach a couple of really simple birth remedies. One is coliphylum. Or cauliflorum, I don't know, different people say it different ways, which is a really good remedy for helping with the birthing process. So we teach the farmers how to use that remedy. And we also teach simple ones like arnica for injuries and hypericum, which is very good for injuries as well. So it's 6 really simple remedies that we start with. And we ask the farmers to do a year plan and think about times of the year when their animals tend to get unwell. And almost without exception, they begin to put together that when their animals get unwell, it tends to be at times like a new stock coming into the herd or the flock. It could be moving the flock. It could be cold weather. It could be weaning. It could be routine checks from the vet. And when they start to see these patterns and they start to use the homeopathic remedies in advance, we say prophylactically, basically in advance of the event, surprise, surprise, the illness seems to be much less because we've already begun to calm down the nervous system of the animal. And that has meant that they are much less likely to get unwell. So that's basically the first stage of what we teach. We also teach about how to treat acute disease with just a few remedies, so really quite straightforward and simple. So things like mastitis, for example, which is really a massive problem for a lot of dairy farmers, because if their cow gets mastitis and they have to use antibiotics, they can't use the milk, which has a big impact on the bottom line. Things like foot disease, lots of very common diseases for young stock. So we teach them how to deal with things like coughs and diarrhea, or we call it scours in the UK. We give them the tools to actually treat a lot of very common acute diseases really quickly. We never tell them not to use the vet. Homeopathy is very much alongside what they use conventionally. But in conventional medicine, there's really nothing which can be used in advance of disease. The disease actually has to start before there can be something done. Of course, the exception to that is doing a vaccination process. But what farmers find is that not only does homeopathy help because it keeps everything calm when the vet comes to do mass vaccination, because they've already treated their animals for the stress, so they tend to have better results and the animals tend not to get so ill. But also, as the herd and the flock and the farm become healthier, they're finding that they're using less and less conventional medicine because they're boosting the health of the whole farm. The other thing we do is we do teach the students on the course a lot about the principles of homeopathy. And one of the biggest principles of homeopathy is maintaining cause. So, maintaining cause is, I can give somebody a remedy all the time for headaches, but if they're drinking a bottle of whiskey every night, they need to probably stop drinking less whiskey. So there's the same thing with our farmers. So we actually get them to step back and say, what are your maintaining causes? Why are your animals becoming unwell? And then they actually step back and say, well, actually, we notice that when the herd is on a particular field, we do tend to get more illness, or we've realized that some of our housing needs to be changed, or feed needs to be looked at, or things like even making a correlation between different herdsmen can sometimes have quite a big impact. If the energy of the herdsman is different, some animals don't really respond so well. So it's a lot more than just teaching farmers how to administer homeopathy and remedies. It's about stepping back and actually looking at a much bigger picture about what's going on your farm. And the great thing about that is we really empower our farmers, because we say that they are actually natural homeopaths, because good homeopathic prescribing is about observation. And farmers observe a lot more than they actually think they do. So often in the very first stages of the course, we'll ask them, how do you know an animal's not right? And they'll say, well, it's just not right. And then we say, well, no, tell us how you think it's not right. And they say, well, no, the ears are back, or the coat is not looking good, or their eyes aren't right, or they're not standing in the same way, or they pause before they go into the milking parlour. I mean, 1,000 things that someone who wasn't a farmer would never see. And often farmers come out of the course saying, I've actually feel much more confident about my own knowledge and my own farming ability now after doing this course than I have for many, many years. And also in the UK, I don't know if it's the same in Australia, it's quite expensive to get a vet out. And very often farmers have to really make a choice of losing an animal because it's just too expensive to get the vet. And the vets are busy, and they just ask much less questions than we do as a homeopath. And very often, actually, the questioning process, the farmer is led to actually what he needs to do himself, without actually having to, even use homeopathy sometimes. Sometimes they just actually realise what the maintaining cause is. They change that, and the animals begin to thrive.
Amazing. You've said so much good stuff in there. I just quickly wanted to touch on something when you said Ignatia. I always just clarify, not to be confused with Echinacea. So Ignatia is made from the Saint Ignatius bean. Such a great remedy for grief and loss. And you know how you say you use it when the babies are taken away from their mums. I use it for the same reason with my humans, is when you are weaning your baby, whether it's done very, very quickly through, maybe you have to go to hospital, or there's something that happened that has meant that you quickly had to stop feeding, or whether it's a conscious decision. Ignatia is really wonderful for the mum and the baby, because it is actually quite traumatic once you break that bond. It's something that's very special, and Ignatia just helps mum and baby to just sail through that. And I love that you're empowering these farmers, because there are so many different reasons why you might want to use homeopathy. I mean, it's got no contraindications. So you know that your animal's not then going to have side effects from the medicines. It's non-habit forming. It's, and here in Australia, where it's such vast open spaces, if you're a farmer that uses homeopathy, it really empowers you so much, because it might not be practical for a vet to even come out to where you are. I mean, we're rural where we live, not that rural, but we had horses for a little while, and one of them had colic. It was going to be $800 to have the vet out. And we ended up using some colocynthus, and we walked, it was just like a pony, walked him, and we gave him something else as well. It was a herbal thing that just made his bowels go. I wish I could remember what it was now. And he was fine by the next morning, but it was, several hours of walking him, giving him the homeopathics, but we saved an $800 vet bill, which was really great.
And your horse.
Yeah, and the horse, most importantly.
Exactly, yeah, absolutely. And then there's no guarantee if the vet had come.
Yeah, absolutely.
What they do works. I mean, obviously most of the time it works, but not always. And sometimes early intervention with a homeopathic remedy is really superior to late intervention because of time, distance, travel, pharmaceutically. So, that's what we always say to our farmers is, don't not call the vet, always call the vet, but do something while you're waiting, because while you're waiting, you may actually start to solve the problem, and you've got a double plus then.
Absolutely. I just remembered it was slippery elm powder.
Slippery elm. Oh, okay.
To the horse. That worked really well. No, that's amazing. And like you said, call the vet anyway, or seek that advice. But there's something that you can do, and there's so much power in actually being able to feel like you're doing something and not just standing around. So that's really wonderful.
And also, we do talk to farmers about actually their state of being as well, how they are, because if you're really stressed in a situation, your animals are going to pick that up. I mean, I know particularly domestic animals, obviously, but even animals which are on your farm, if you're calm and you're working it through and you're actually thinking about what you can do for your animal, your energy is going to be much better, and you're going to be able to help your animal's vital force to feel more at ease and much more likely to overcome whatever it is that's going on. So, there's quite a lot of, there's lots of layers to the way that we work with farmers.
And did you say that you teach them agro-homeopathy as well? So how they can use homeopathy with their plants, or is it mainly
We don't do that. There are other organisations that do that. We really focus very much on animal health.
Okay, excellent. So do you mention it to them at all about agro-homeopathy?
Yeah. Well, actually, a lot of the students who come on the course are very knowledgeable. So we have a real mix. So you may have some people who come on the course who used homeopathy for a long time, have been using it with plants and crops, and then we may have some others who have never even opened a book and have no idea what homeopathy is, particularly if perhaps the farmer who has herdsmen or people who work in the dairy, and they may well send their staff to learn how to use homeopathy, and sometimes they have got no idea about what homeopathy is about. So, it's quite interesting for the teachers to have to be able to teach at all levels, but it works really well because the course materials are well developed, so that there's enough room there to challenge somebody who perhaps has got more knowledge about homeopathy, but also the materials are there to give people without any background knowledge really good backup.
Amazing. And where do your farmers tend to come from? Like, how do you advertise yourself, or how do you get the word out there?
Quite often it's word of mouth. Advertising is expensive and takes a huge amount of the budget. The farmers' magazines, also organisations who already know about us and who already have farmers who, use their services will refer us on. I've done some work with a local guy who has animal feed business, and he became converted to homeopathy. And now he talks to his clients about using homeopathy, and I've done a talk for him with his farmers about how homeopathy could be really helpful for them. So it tends to be, again, quite organic and at Wellie level. Very often it is farmers talking to farmers, and farmers, get themselves into groups and sometimes ask the team to come to where they are, perhaps in, say, Ireland or Wales. Or I actually ran a course over here on the east side of the country for a group of farmers a few years ago now. So it tends to be through more organic methods rather than massive advertising campaigns. But that's mainly because the organisation is quite small and is not for profit. And also it's about quality, really, rather than quantity. And we support farmers after they have done the course. So once they've done the course, we run either one-day workshops, or I've written and run for the organisation a few lunchtime seminars where we tackle things like coughs or infections, or we're going to do one in the autumn about the birthing process. So, there's all different support networks available for people after they've actually finished the course. And of course, being online makes that a lot easier.
That's amazing. I wonder, Rachel, do you have some success stories that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I have got one here. Somebody who did the course, he had a cow that had niggling mastitis over 3 weeks, not responding to antibiotics. So after the last session of the course, when we came to use one of your remedies, which is called pulsatilla, pulsatilla is a remedy which is often used a lot with young animals, and also used a lot can be used for mastitis in humans as well. So when they did a timeline, so we teach our farmers how to actually look at what has happened to the animal over time. So rather than just saying, the cow's got mastitis, what do we do? It's like, when did it start? What was the thing that maybe upset the animal? What's the weather like? Have we changed the feed? Have we changed perhaps something on the milking machine? We really teach them how to do that. So when he said, we looked at the timeline, he said, I did what I was told on the timeline. And I thought back, and I thought she'd had a creamy, bland discharge. Okay, so, and then worked out that was after a change of feed. And of course, that's very much pulsatilla. If you change feed and it becomes more rich, that can sometimes cause a problem. And basically looked at what was happening actually with the discharge in the milk, and how the animal was, the demeanour of the animal as well. And after 3 days, she's back to normal, and the milk yield is back up, and no antibiotics.
Amazing.
So, there's lots of stories like that where people have been able to use homeopathy for a routine acute situation, which normally would have meant antibiotics. and they haven't had to use them. We do have a mix of organic farmers and also more, conventional farmers. And of course, it has a big impact on the bottom line if you can use homeopathy, which is very much cheaper, and you've got healthy animals and you haven't got to stop using the milk. That makes a big difference. But also, just for all animals, really, if you're putting in your budget that you often have to spend a certain amount on antibiotics, and by using homeopathy, you're actually reducing that. Farmers really like that because, they're a business. They have
Absolutely.
to make money. So, but they're a business. But of course, they have an emotional investment in their animals as well. So they want to see their animals healthy and well.
And it's such an important point that you touched on earlier, where if you continue, the more you use the homeopathy, the stronger your herd is going to become, because pharmaceutical medication in its nature is very suppressive. So it's not actually allowing the body to heal itself. It's just suppressing symptoms. And I mean, if you're using the longer you use the homeopathy on your animals, the stronger they're going to become, and the stronger offspring they're going to be producing as well.
Absolutely,
and those offspring will be healthier. So it reduces your workload, it reduces your costs, it reduces the stress. It's just a really no-brainer.
And we actually do teach what we call the pyramid of health, actually, when we start teaching farmers. So the bottom line is using homeopathic medicines on a herd level. So, like a farmer would conventionally perhaps use a vaccination for tuberculosis. We can actually put them in the direction of a very good pharmacist here in the UK, in Ainsworth's UK-based homeopathic pharmacy. And he's very experienced in actually working with farmers to use preventative medicine, basically put into the water supply, that can actually help to reduce the reliance on injections and vaccination. So that's the first level. The second level is what we teach, I said at the beginning, which is about learning how to iron out those stressful times. The next level is acute things like the mastitis. Then the next level is more chronic disease, which is, you notice that, offspring of a certain animal tends to have very similar health issues. So you begin to actually treat the animal much more as a whole and much more long-term. That's quite advanced, and sometimes that's only for people quite experienced with homeopathy. And then the top level is we actually look at the whole farm. And I've done some work with a farmer here, and we found that he, his wife, and his herd all needed the same remedy.
It's not surprising, really.
And then when we did that, everyone got better. And
amazing.
The whole energy of the farm changed. So, there's lots of levels that you can take it. But even if you do the basic level right at the beginning, you're going to see an impact.
Amazing. So, Rachel, how can people support this organisation? You said it's a not-for-profit. How can they get involved and where can they reach you?
Yeah, basically, they just need to go to the internet and tap in www.hall.co.uk. So that's HAWL. Or they can type in homeopathy at Wellie level. And the Wellie is spelt with IE. And the homeopathy is the old way of spelling it with the extra E's.
So HOMOEO.
That's it. That's
Homeopathy.
Yeah, basically. So if they just type that in, and that should bring up the Hall website, and then they can contact Chris Lees is the organizer of the organisation. It's her baby, really.
Oh, that's incredible. Thank you so much for coming on today, Rachel. Is there one last thing that you want to leave our listeners with? One last message that you want to get out there of, homeopathy and how it can help people in their lives?
Basically, seeing homeopathy as just part of your life and stepping back and trusting yourself and your skills of observation, and taking some homeopathy perhaps yourself just to calm down before you step back and look at everybody else. The same things to my mums, when they ring me in a flap and say, little Johnny's got a fever. And it's like, well, just stop for a moment and tell me, what's happening, how hot is he? And then actually, it often works out that once they actually stop and think, they often know exactly what to do. And that's what they say with the farmers. You often know. And that thing to do may be calling the vet. I mean, you know, there's no heroics here. You don't have to not use the vet. But sometimes the stepping back and thinking is the bigger step.
Thank you so much for coming on today. And I really hope there's some farmers and also some Australian homeopaths that get in touch with you about coming on board with this program. And the more farmers we can empower with this knowledge, the healthier the whole world is going to be at the end of the day. Because at the end of the day, that if we are consuming those animals and it's coming from great source and the farms are healthy, everyone benefits at the end of the day. So
absolutely.
Thank you for doing the work that you do.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me along.
It's a pleasure. Chat soon. Bye.
Okay, bye.
The Homeopathy Hangout podcast is produced by Eugenie Kruger Homeopathy. For more information, visit eugeniekruger.com. The information presented in this podcast is for educational purposes only and does not replace advice from your medical practitioner. Please read our full disclaimer in the show notes. Thank you for listening.